King David. The name itself conjures images of courage, faith, and leadership. When we talk about figures from the Old Testament, many names come to mind: Abraham, Moses, Joseph. But when it comes to archaeological significance, to the actual physical remnants and historical impact, David stands out in a way that few others do. He's not just a character in ancient texts. He's a figure whose life and reign are increasingly confirmed by discoveries. A real person who shaped a nation and left an indelible mark on history. The stories surrounding him, often perceived as mythical, are instead proving to be deeply rooted in verifiable facts. This makes his narrative even more compelling, moving it from the realm of pure faith into a tangible historical reality that continues to fascinate scholars and believers alike. One of the most famous stories about David, of course, is his encounter with Goliath. It's a tale that has been told and retold for centuries, a classic underdog victory. But what many people don't realize is that Goliath wasn't the only giant David faced, or at least the only giant connected to David's story. The biblical narrative mentions other giants, 5 in total, who were part of the Philistine lineage and posed a significant threat to Israel. This detail often gets overlooked, but it paints a picture of a much larger, more complex struggle than just one individual battle. It suggests that David wasn't just lucky, he was part of a larger plan, a strategic effort to neutralize a persistent menace. These other giants, each with their own intimidating presence, were also eventually defeated, some by David himself and others by his loyal men, solidifying the idea that David's fight against Goliath was just the beginning of a series of confrontations with these towering figures. Think about that for a moment. 5 giants. Not just one, but 5. This changes the perception of David's preparation and strategic thinking. When David went to face Goliath, he picked up 5 smooth stones from the stream. This wasn't just a random act, it was a deliberate choice. He wasn't just preparing for Goliath, he was preparing for Goliath and his potential giant brethren. This shows a level of foresight and strategic planning that goes beyond simple bravery. It suggests David understood the scale of the threat, not just as an immediate challenge from one giant, but as a systemic problem that required a broader solution. He wasn't just reacting, he was anticipating. He was thinking several steps ahead, understanding that defeating one giant might not be enough to secure victory if others remained. This strategic approach tells us a lot about David's character and leadership style. He wasn't just a shepherd boy with a sling. He was a natural leader, capable of assessing a situation, identifying risks, and planning accordingly. The 5 stones symbolize this preparedness, this readiness to face not just the immediate enemy, but the entire scope of the challenge. It wasn't about relying on chance. It was about being thoroughly equipped for whatever came next. This detail elevates the story from a simple act of faith to a demonstration of intelligent, divinely inspired strategy. It turns David into more than just a hero. It makes him a military tactician, a visionary who understood the importance of comprehensive planning in the face of overwhelming odds. This deepens our appreciation for David's character, revealing a man who combined profound faith with practical wisdom and strategic thinking, making him a truly remarkable figure in history. This strategic depth, this careful planning, wasn't just limited to his battles against giants. It extended to his interactions with people, especially his relationship with King Saul. The conflict between David and Saul is a central theme in David's early life, and it reveals another crucial aspect of his character: his patience and his unwavering respect for God's anointed. There were multiple instances where David had the perfect opportunity to kill Saul, to end the persecution, and claim the throne that he knew was rightfully his. Yet each time, David held back. He refused to lay a hand on Saul, not because he was afraid, but because he believed that only God had the right to remove a king he had appointed. Consider the scene in the cave, for example. Saul, pursuing David with his army, enters a cave to relieve himself, unaware that David and his men are hiding deeper inside. David's men urge him to strike, to finally rid himself of his tormentor. It was a chance handed to him on a silver platter. But David merely crept up and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Later, he showed the piece of cloth to Saul, proving he could have killed him. This was not weakness. It was a profound act of mercy and faith. David chose to trust in God's timing, rather than taking matters into his own hands. He understood that his enemy wasn't just a man, but the king chosen by God, and that such a conflict had spiritual dimensions beyond simple human revenge. This distinction is important. Goliath was a foreign enemy, an uncircumcised Philistine who defied the armies of the living God. He was an enemy of Israel and, by extension, an enemy of God. David had no compunctions about defeating Goliath, for that was a straightforward battle against evil. Saul, however, was different. Saul was an Israelite, God's anointed king, albeit a flawed and disobedient one. David saw Saul not as a personal enemy to be eliminated, but as a misguided leader whose reign was coming to an end by divine decree, not by David's sword. This showed incredible maturity and a deep understanding of spiritual principles. He wasn't seeking personal vengeance or power. He was waiting for the path God had laid out for him to unfold. This theme of waiting for evil to self-destruct is a powerful one in David's story. He didn't rush to avenge himself or seize power. Instead, he patiently endured Saul's jealous rages and attempts on his life. He allowed Saul's own poor choices, his disobedience to God, and his escalating paranoia to lead to his downfall. David understood that sometimes the best strategy against an enemy, especially one who is self-destructing, is to simply step back and let them create their own ruin. This required immense self-control and a profound trust in God's justice. It wasn't about being passive, but about being strategically patient, knowing that justice would eventually prevail without him having to compromise his own integrity or defy God's will. His actions demonstrate a wisdom that went far beyond his years. He could have easily justified killing Saul, claiming self-defense or divine mandate. But David chose a higher path. He chose mercy, respect for authority, and faith in God's ultimate plan. This patience and restraint were not signs of weakness, but of profound strength and conviction. It showed that David was not just a warrior, but a man of deep spiritual understanding, capable of making difficult moral choices even when his life was on the line. He knew that his time would come, but it would come on God's terms, not his own. This distinction between how he treated Goliath and how he treated Saul speaks volumes about David's character, separating him from a mere opportunistic rebel and elevating him to a truly righteous leader. This understanding of leadership and divine timing, coupled with his willingness to face overwhelming odds, makes David's encounter with Goliath even more remarkable. It brings us to the question of David's age during this incredible event. When we picture David standing against Goliath, we often imagine him as a young boy, perhaps even a child. The Bible describes him as a youth, which in ancient times had a different meaning than our modern understanding of adolescence. We can estimate David's age to be around 15 during this famous confrontation. We know this because his older brothers were already serving in Saul's army, which means they were old enough to be soldiers. In ancient Israel, military service typically began in the late teens or early 20s, suggesting that David, being the youngest, would have been younger than that, but not so young as to be considered a small child. The concept of adolescence as a distinct developmental stage with its own specific social and psychological characteristics wasn't explicitly recognized in biblical times in the same way it is today. A person was generally considered either a child or an adult. with the transition often marked by physical maturity and the ability to contribute to the family or community. So, while David might have been 15 by our modern reckoning, he was already considered an adult in many practical senses. He was responsible for tending his father's sheep, a task that required courage, vigilance, and physical strength. This wasn't a child's chore. It was a serious responsibility, especially in a land where predators like lions and bears were a constant threat. His experience as a shepherd was not just a pastime. It was his training ground, preparing him for the monumental tasks that lay ahead. So, when David stepped forward to face Goliath, he wasn't just a boy in the modern sense of the word. He was a young man, certainly, but one who had already faced danger, developed skills, and shouldered significant responsibilities. His youth, in the biblical context, meant he was not yet a seasoned warrior. Not that he was entirely inexperienced or naive. He had the physical capabilities and the mental fortitude of an adult, albeit a young one. This distinction is crucial because it helps us understand that David's victory wasn't just a miracle of a child overcoming a giant. It was the triumph of a capable, divinely chosen young man who was prepared for his moment. He wasn't simply plucked from obscurity as a helpless boy. He was a shepherd who had already proven his bravery and resourcefulness in the face of danger. This context also sheds light on the perception of David by others. His older brother, Eliab, scolds him, asking why he left the sheep and what he was doing there. This isn't just an older brother being annoyed. It reflects the societal expectation that David, as the youngest, should be tending to his duties, not involving himself in military affairs. But David, despite his relative youth, felt a deeper call. He wasn't just observing the battle. He was there because he believed he had a part to play. His adult status, despite his young age, meant he was capable of making such a decision and taking on such a challenge. He wasn't just a curious bystander. He was a participant, ready to step up when no one else would. This readiness, this sense of responsibility, was a hallmark of his character, even at a young age. It showed that he was mature beyond his years, not just physically but spiritually and mentally as well. His youth did not diminish his capacity for leadership or his effectiveness as a warrior. It merely highlighted the extraordinary nature of his calling. He was a young man, but he was also a man of faith, ready to fulfill his destiny. David's unwavering faith in God was the true weapon he carried, far more potent than any sword or shield. When he finally stood before Goliath, overlooking the massive, sneering Philistine, David didn't just see a giant. He saw an offense against everything he believed in. He saw a man who dared to challenge not just the Israelite army, but the living God they served. His question to Goliath wasn't a tactical maneuver, it was a rhetorical challenge born from deep conviction. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? He demanded. This wasn't bravado. It was a fundamental statement of belief. For David, the battle was not about his own strength or skill. It was about God's honor. Goliath, with his massive armor and intimidating stature, represented the pagan world, a world that worshipped idols and relied on brute force. The Philistines were known for their military might and their polytheistic religion, a stark contrast to the monotheistic faith of the Israelites. David understood this contrast deeply. He knew that the Philistines' gods were nothing compared to the one true God who had delivered Israel time and again. Goliath's taunts and challenges were not just directed at the soldiers, they were blasphemous insults hurled at the Almighty. This understanding fueled David's courage. While the seasoned warriors of Israel trembled in fear, paralyzed by the giant's threats, David saw an opportunity for God to demonstrate his power. He wasn't relying on his own physical prowess, though he was certainly capable. He was relying on the divine. His youth, which might have seemed like a disadvantage, actually freed him from the conventional military thinking that had gripped Saul and his army. They were looking at Goliath through human eyes, measuring his height, his armor, his spear. David was looking at Goliath through the eyes of faith, measuring him against the infinite power of God. The contrast between the Jewish people's faith and the Philistines' paganism was central to David's perspective. The Israelites, despite their occasional failings, had a covenant with God. They were his chosen people, and their battles were often fought with the understanding that divine intervention was possible, even expected. The Philistines, on the other hand, trusted in their own strength, their numbers, and their formidable champions. Goliath was the epitome of this reliance on human might. He was their champion, their symbol of power, and he boasted in his own abilities, not in any divine assistance. David's challenge to Goliath was therefore more than just a fight between two individuals. It was a clash of worldviews, a spiritual confrontation. He wasn't just fighting for his people's freedom, he was fighting for the honor of God's name. This spiritual dimension gave him an unshakable resolve. He knew that if God was on their side, no giant, no matter how formidable, could stand against them. His words were a direct rebuke to Goliath's arrogance, and a powerful declaration of faith to his own people, who had lost hope. He saw Goliath not as an insurmountable obstacle, but as a vessel through which God's glory could be revealed. This perspective completely changed the dynamics of the encounter. While everyone else saw defeat, David saw victory. While others saw a monstrous enemy, David saw an opportunity to uphold righteousness. His faith was not a passive belief. It was an active force that drove him forward, giving him the strength to do what no one else dared. He embodied the very essence of faith, stepping out when all odds were against him, trusting in a power far greater than his own. This profound faith, this unwavering conviction in the face of overwhelming odds, is what set David apart from every other man in the Israelite army that day. It was the foundation of his courage and the ultimate source of his triumph. He was a young man, yes, but a young man filled with an ancient, powerful faith. David's confidence wasn't just blind faith, it was rooted in experience. He had faced dangers before, perhaps not on the scale of Goliath, but dangers nonetheless. He reminded Saul and the trembling soldiers that he had spent his days as a shepherd protecting his flock. He wasn't just idly watching sheep graze, he was their guardian. When a lion or a bear came to snatch a lamb from his care, David didn't run. He pursued the animal, struck it down, and rescued the lamb from its mouth. This wasn't just a simple anecdote. It was a testament to his practical skills, his courage, and his unwavering commitment to protecting what was entrusted to him. God had delivered him from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, and David was certain that the same God would deliver him from the hand of this uncircumcised Philistine. He wasn't going into battle unarmed, nor was he relying on the heavy, cumbersome armor that Saul had offered. David politely declined Saul's armor, recognizing it would hinder rather than help him. It wasn't what he was used to. Instead, he chose his most familiar weapons, his shepherd's staff, his sling, and 5 smooth stones he carefully selected from the riverbed. These were the tools of his trade, honed through countless hours of practice and real-world application. The sling, often underestimated, was a formidable weapon in skilled hands. It could hurl stones at incredible speeds with surprising accuracy and force. For David, it was not merely a projectile weapon, it was an extension of his will, a symbol of his preparedness and his reliance on what he knew best. As David approached Goliath, the giant scoffed at him, mocking his youth and his appearance. Goliath cursed David by his gods, promising to feed his flesh to the birds and wild animals. But David was unfazed. He retorted with a powerful declaration, stating that he came against Goliath in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom Goliath had defied. David proclaimed that the Lord would deliver Goliath into his hand that very day, and he would strike him down and cut off his head. This battle, David declared, was not about human strength, but about God's power, so that all the earth might know there is a God in Israel. With that, David ran towards Goliath. He didn't hesitate or show any fear. He reached into his shepherd's bag, pulled out one of his smooth stones, and loaded it into his sling. He swung the sling with all his might, the stone whistling through the air with deadly precision. The stone struck Goliath squarely in the forehead, sinking deep into his skull. The mighty giant, who had terrorized an entire army for 40 days, staggered and then fell face down to the ground. The impact was immediate and devastating. The Philistine army watched in stunned silence as their champion collapsed. David, without a sword of his own, quickly ran to the fallen giant. He stood over Goliath, drew the giant's own massive sword from its sheath, and used it to cut off Goliath's head. The visual was stark and powerful, the small shepherd boy holding the head of the colossal warrior. This final act solidified the victory and left no doubt about Goliath's demise. Seeing their champion dead, the Philistines panicked. Their morale shattered. They turned and fled in disarray. The Israelite soldiers, emboldened by David's incredible feat, let out a mighty roar and pursued their fleeing enemies, routing them completely and securing a resounding victory for Israel. The battle, which had seemed hopeless just moments before, was won by a young shepherd boy armed with faith and a sling. The symbolism of Goliath's death, particularly by his own sword, is a powerful lesson that resonates even today. For 40 long days, Goliath had stood before the Israelite army, taunting them, challenging them, and filling them with dread. He had boasted about his strength, his armor, and his military prowess. He had strutted and bellowed, confident in his own might, believing himself invincible. His pride was immense, his ego colossal, much like his physical stature. He had used his words as weapons, demoralizing an entire nation with his arrogance and defiance of their God. He had expected a champion to emerge, someone worthy of his own grandiosity, and instead, he was met by a young shepherd boy. This man, Goliath, had spent more than a month terrorizing an entire army, not with direct combat, but with psychological warfare, with words. He had used his imposing figure and his loud voice to instill fear. He had made himself the center of attention, believing his personal strength and reputation were enough to conquer. And in the end, that very strength, that very reputation, became his undoing. When David finally brought him down, not with a grand equal battle, but with a simple, well-aimed stone, the irony began. Goliath, the mighty warrior, fell not to another warrior's sword, but to a stone from a shepherd's sling. But the symbolism deepened further. David, lacking a sword of his own, took Goliath's sword, a weapon of immense size and terrifying reputation, and used it to sever the giant's head. Goliath was killed by his own weapon. He was destroyed by the very things he trusted most, the very symbols of his power and identity. This act was not just a practical solution for David, it was a profound statement. It illustrated that the things we rely on, the things we use to harm others or to elevate ourselves above them, can often be turned against us. Goliath's sword, which he had likely wielded with such confidence and used to intimidate so many, became the instrument of his final, humiliating defeat. His strength, his stature, his massive weapons, his loud boasts, all of these elements that defined his intimidating presence ultimately contributed to his downfall. His excessive pride, his belief in his own invincibility, blinded him to the true nature of the challenge he faced. He underestimated David, dismissing him as a mere boy, and paid the ultimate price for his arrogance. This narrative teaches a timeless lesson. Unchecked ego and pride often lead to self-destruction. When one becomes so consumed by their own importance, their own power, or their own voice, they become vulnerable. They stop seeing the world clearly, they underestimate others, and they become incapable of adapting. Goliath's 40 days of taunting were not just a display of strength. They were a display of a fatal flaw. He believed his words, his size, and his weaponry were enough to guarantee victory, and he was too proud to consider any other possibility. His own sword, a symbol of his power, became the tool of his demise. It is a stark reminder that the very things we weaponize, be they physical tools or emotional tactics like intimidation and scorn, can often be the very means by which we are brought low. The story of Goliath's defeat is not just about David's faith and skill. It is also a cautionary tale about the dangers of an inflated ego and the ultimate self-destruction that pride can bring. The narrative surrounding Goliath often focuses solely on him, but the Bible itself tells us there was more to the story. It wasn't just one giant that David and his men faced. In fact, there were 5. The book of 2 Samuel chapter 21 and 1 Chronicles chapter 20 clearly state that 4 other giants, or men of unusual size, were killed by David and his mighty men. While Goliath might have been the most famous, the most intimidating figure, he was part of a larger family or group of formidable warriors. One of these, named Ishbi-Benob, was killed by Abishai, David's nephew. Another giant, Saph, was killed by Sibbecai the Hushathite. A third, unnamed but described as having 6 fingers and 6 toes on each hand and foot, was killed by Jonathan, David's nephew. And finally, Lami, Goliath's brother, was killed by Elhanan. This detail is crucial because it reinforces David's strategic foresight. He didn't just pick up 5 smooth stones because it sounded good. He picked them because he understood the threat. He knew he wasn't just facing Goliath. He was facing a lineage, a family, or at least a group of powerful adversaries. His preparedness extended beyond the immediate challenge, demonstrating a deeper understanding of the enemy's capabilities and the broader conflict. Archaeological discoveries have also shed light on the historical context of this famous battle. The site of Kirbet Keiapha, located near the valley of Elah, where the battle between David and Goliath is believed to have taken place, is particularly significant. Excavations there have revealed a fortified city dating back to the time of King David, complete with 2 gates, which is unusual for cities of that period. This discovery suggests a strategically important location, perfectly suited for a major confrontation between 2 armies. The valley of Elah itself is characterized by its seasonal riverbed, a wadi that would have been dry for much of the year, providing ample smooth stones. It's easy to imagine young David, a shepherd intimately familiar with the terrain, knowing exactly where to find the perfect projectiles for his sling. The accuracy and power of a well-used sling should not be underestimated. It wasn't a primitive toy. In the hands of an expert, it was a deadly weapon. Historical accounts and modern experiments have shown that a sling could launch a stone at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour, delivering a crushing blow capable of breaking bones and causing fatal injury, even against armored opponents. The impact force could be comparable to that of a modern handgun. So when David chose his 5 smooth stones, he wasn't just relying on faith. He was also relying on a weapon he had mastered, a weapon that could genuinely fell a giant. His choice of weapon was not a sign of weakness, but a testament to his skill and his practical understanding of warfare. He didn't need Saul's heavy, unfamiliar armor or sword. He needed what he knew, what he had practiced, and what he could use with precision. This combination of divine faith and honed skill made him an unstoppable force against an overconfident giant. The battlefield, the weapons, and the opponents all align with the biblical account, reinforcing the historical plausibility of David's legendary triumph. David's entire life, it seemed, had been a long, deliberate preparation for moments like the one in the valley of Elah. His years, spent as a shepherd, often alone with his flock, were not just a way to pass the time. They were his training ground. Day in and day out, he honed his skills with the sling, not for battle against men, but to protect his sheep from predators. He faced down lions and bears, developing an uncanny accuracy and an unwavering nerve. Each stone he launched, each predator he deterred or defeated, was a lesson in precision, courage, and reliance on his own abilities. He didn't know it then, of course. He wasn't thinking, "One day, this will help me fight a giant." He was simply doing his job, fulfilling his duty as a shepherd, protecting what was entrusted to him. It's a classic example of what Steve Jobs once called connecting the dots in hindsight. You can't connect them looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. David's seemingly ordinary, even mundane, pastoral life was, in fact, God's perfect curriculum, preparing him for an extraordinary destiny. His victory over Goliath launched him into national prominence, but it also brought him into direct conflict with King Saul. Saul, once the chosen leader, had grown increasingly paranoid and insecure. He saw David's popularity not as an asset to his kingdom, but as a personal threat to his throne. The women singing, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands," was a daily reminder of his waning influence and David's rising star. This jealousy became a consuming fire within Saul, driving him to repeated attempts on David's life. David, despite being anointed by Samuel as the future king, never once raised a hand against Saul. He had multiple opportunities to kill Saul, to seize the throne by force, but he consistently refused. He understood that his ascension was not his to orchestrate. It was God's plan, to be fulfilled in God's time. This patience was a hallmark of David's character and a crucial part of his journey to kingship. He spent years on the run, living in caves, hiding in deserts, leading a band of loyal followers. He endured hardship, betrayal, and the constant threat of death. Yet he never wavered in his belief that God would make him king. He didn't rush the process. He didn't plot or scheme to depose Saul. He simply waited, trusting in divine timing, learning invaluable lessons in leadership, humility, and faith during those arduous years. This period forged him into a resilient, compassionate leader, ready to rule not just with strength, but with wisdom and a deep understanding of human suffering. When Saul finally fell in battle against the Philistines, David mourned him deeply, even though Saul had been his relentless enemy. It showed David's profound respect for the office of king and for God's anointed, regardless of personal animosity. David's path to the throne was not one of ambition and conquest, but of patient endurance and obedience. He waited for the people to call him, first to be king over Judah, and then, 7 years later, over all Israel. His journey from an unknown shepherd boy to the revered king of Israel was a testament to his faith, his character, and the meticulous, often unseen, hand of divine preparation. Every challenge, every skill learned, every moment of waiting, all converged to prepare him for his ultimate role, proving that true leadership often emerges from unexpected places and through unconventional training.